New developments involving the deadly crash of the Boeing 737 MAX jet. Boeing CEO speaking out about it overnight as we learn more about what those black boxes reveal. David Curley is at a 737 simulator in Toronto with more. Good morning, David.
Good morning, Robin. We're trying to give you a sense of what it's like in this aircraft a little bit later. But first, the news. Those investigators are getting together in Ethiopia, and in the next day and a half, we may have more information on what happened in this second crash. For the first time since 157 people perished in that second Boeing 737 MAX crash in Ethiopia, the CEO appearing on camera in a statement to the flying public.
Lives depend on the work we do at Boeing, and that demands the utmost excellence and integrity in how we do it.
He says his company is cooperating with the FAA and the NTSB on the investigation into this crash, now gathering in Ethiopia to analyze the black box data, and the Lion Air crash less than 5 months ago, in which the aircraft acted in a similar way.
Together, we'll keep striving to earn and keep the trust people have placed in Boeing.
Boeing, according to one financial analyst, could lose $500 million a month coming in, while it stopped delivery of the 737 MAXs. This as questions swirl about how this aircraft was approved to fly. The Seattle Times reporting the FAA, underfunded and low on resources, pressured its engineers to cede more and more control of the safety review to Boeing.
It is the norm now for most of the work of certifying the safety of an airplane to be delegated to Boeing engineers.
Now increased scrutiny, investigations about how the jet's new anti-stall system, called MCAS, connected with the first crash, was certified safe. Boeing did market this model to airlines as cost-effective, requiring minimal training and no time in a simulator because of commonality with the previous version, the 737 Next Gen.
I talked to an American Airlines pilot who told me that his transition from the 737 NG to the 737 MAX required him to train for approximately an hour or less than 2 hours on an iPad. There was no simulator training. There was no real-world training. That was it.
Away we go downhill.
Flight instructor Aaron Murphy is in a simulator from that previous model of the 737. In the first crash, we know that right after takeoff, bad data turned on that anti-stall system, the MCAS.
The MCAS perhaps is sending the information in that says we're stalling. We fight it, we get on the trim, we try to recover from that.
The difference in the MAX is that this automatic system would be more aggressive in pushing the plane's nose down, essentially putting it into a dive.
The MCAS is trimming nose down.
Murphy illustrating how that anti-stall system, which pilots didn't know about before the Lion Air crash, was difficult to battle. And if they did correct, the MCAS would re-engage.
The MCAS is trimming nose down. We're fighting it, and then the MCAS kicks in again.
The question this morning was that anti-stall system involved in both crashes.
It just becomes a seesaw battle. And every time the MCAS takes over, it's trimming a little further nose down.
So we are simulating right now nose down. And Aaron, Boeing has a procedure basically that you're supposed to follow if this happens. What do you do?
Absolutely, it's the runaway trim procedure, and the first thing I'm going to do is turn off the autopilot, get rid of the automation.
All right, but if the tail is still nose down, you have two switches down here.
That's correct.
Go ahead.
I got to come down to the stabilizer trim cutoff switches.
And shut it off, and now this is a manual wheel which doesn't turn in the simulator, but you are actually now moving the tail back up to get us back up to level flight. You are completely flying manually at this point.
That's correct. I'm recovering the flight path of the aircraft, and we're going to head straight back to the airfield.
The procedure basically shut off the system, which you just did. Now, this looks very complicated if you've not been one of these cockpits, but this is kind of like your car.
It's 1,000 buttons and switches for a newcomer, but with the right training, it's second nature.
All right, well, new software is coming on the way the MCAS works in the MAX. That's supposed to be out in a couple of weeks, guys, according to Boeing and the FAA.
How many simulators are there, Steve?
So there are only a few, actually. Boeing has one in Miami. Air Canada here in Canada has one. American Airlines is getting theirs in December. Basically, the simulator is very similar, except for a couple of these systems that act differently in the MAX than they do in this next gen, the earlier version, Robin.
Okay, and I'm sorry I called you Steve, because we're about to, David, we're about to talk to aviation expert Colonel Steve Ganyard. What did you see in that demo, Steve?
Robin, really interesting there. I'm glad David did that, because that tells us what could have prevented the Lion Air mishap. In the Lion Air mishap, there was maintenance malpractice, there were things that weren't fixed, and then there was pilot error. You saw those two switches that the captain there in the simulator switched off. If those two switches had been switched off and left off in the Lion Air crash, it would have never come down. So the real question is did this new autopilot that Boeing initialized in the MAX, was it a contributing factor? But we have to go back to what we know in the Lion crash was human error.
How can people trust? How can passengers trust manufacturers, regulators, when they're only being told now that they're doing what they can to make sure that that aircraft is fully safe? Only now they're doing that.
Yeah, Robin, we haven't seen anything that would suggest that there was any duplicity or Boeing was covering something up. But David did point out here that there's a real balance. Where was the FAA underfunded, and did they have to rely on Boeing to certify this jet? And in the process, did something where an engineer said, well, this could never happen because people would have to make 5 or 6 different errors? Did that actually happen? And did this autopilot contribute to the mishap in Lion Air and maybe in the Ethiopian crash? But Robin, you know, flying is based on trust. It's just not natural to get in that little tube up there and fly at 6 miles above the earth at the speed of sound. And so when something calls into question the safety of that airplane, people get very nervous. Boeing, as a business, rests on trust. If they can't get our trust back, they're not going to be around much longer as a company. So they have a vested interest in making sure this gets fixed and fixed fast.
Hey, of course they have a vested interest in this, but is the problem just FAA being underfunded? Is there some kind of an inherent conflict there where the FAA is supposed to be making sure we protect safety? Boeing needs to get those planes on the line.
That's true. So there is a tension there, George, between the commercial push to get these airplanes off and to get them certified quickly. And so this is something that the Congress is actually going to have to go back in its oversight role and make sure that too much of the certification process is not being given to the manufacturer. It's a real question.
Okay, Steve Gaynor, thanks very much.
And our thanks to David, too, for the simulation.
That's fascinating.